Okay, everyone, welcome back to the Rav Kook shiur. Again, we always start with where we are, where we're holding. We are holding in. Would you like me to shut the door? Is the door too loud? No, it's good. Okay. We are holding in. Where are we holding? Okay. We're holding in the Zronim section. And basically, what we've been talking about is, as we've been learning for the last bunch of weeks, suffering and transforming. That's much better on this windy day. We've been talking about transforming trauma, transforming suffering, transforming difficulties in life, both on a personal level, on a national level, and the historical process that happens of transforming hardships in our lives and in everyday matters. Well, Rav Kook is showing us how all kefira, all trauma, all difficulties, all pain, all suffering comes for a good reason. And that is to transform us to a deeper understanding, right? When things go wrong in our lives, we look inwards and we hopefully grow from it. And what we're going to see is, I'm just preempting a little bit. First of all, it's so perfect that we learn this around Purim, because Purim is all about v'nahapachu, right? Purim is adlo yada, right? We're talking about not understanding Hashem. We're talking about v'nahapachu, as Rabbi Nachman says, yesh inyan she'akol mahapech l'tova. There is something that everything gets flipped for the good. And Rav Kook is showing us that, right? He's showing us how the worst things, how the kefira, how the broken relationships, how the difficulties in life somehow transform into goodness for us. Hey, Effie, welcome. Right, it's okay. We're talking about how we're transforming trauma and difficulties, and how, I'm just mentioning about Purim, is the inyan of v'nahapachu, that everything gets transformed. Yesh inyan shakol mahapech netova. Now, as we continue in this piece, I don't know where this is going to end up, but I wanted to delve into a little bit historically about Rav Kook, a little bit, okay? What we're saying here is that it's the tzaddik, it's the amazing tzaddik who's able to look into the klippos, and to look into the depths, look into where it looks like there's no Hashem, and bring Hashem back into the fold. Because we're finding the goodness, as we read the first line of this week, last line of last week, Misha maker satoch shebekfira, mitzad zeh motzes es duvsho umachzir l'shorsha. The person who recognizes the inside of kefira, they suck out the honey, and they return it to its roots, side of Kedusha, umistako behod kerach hanoer kfor shamayim. And they're able to see this amazing light that's hidden betoch klippos. Okay. Now, I just want to take the opportunity to read something in English for a second, okay? This is Rav Noor's translation of Orot. He definitely doesn't have all the sections of Orot, okay? He just has the beginning section. It's not what we're learning here. As far as I know, the Zeronim section is actually not translated. I've never found it in English before, so if anyone wants to work on a translation of the shiur together with me, we can do that. And what Rav Betzalel Noor has, he has all sorts of historical footnotes, context, all sorts of things. So what he brings in the beginning over here is he brings Rav Kook's Cherem letter, okay? Because there was a big controversy with Rav Kook, as a kiyadua. Most people don't really understand what the controversy was about. But there's a Cherem letter. He translated into English. It's signed by the son of Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin. It's signed by Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. It's signed by Rav Frankel, Rav Moshe Yosef Hoffman, the Rabbad. He was the president of the Aguda. The big guns, okay? And what they wrote about him, this Cherem letter that they wrote about, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but is precisely what Rav Kook was doing. In fact, I heard Rav Betzalel Noor say in a podcast, it was an old podcast, but I had heard it within the year. He says, and in certain ways, Rav Kook was flattered by the letter. That's what he said. He was somewhat flattered by it. And I think there's a parallel process between what we're learning now in how we have to find the good in the kefira and the transform the suffering into joy, v'nahapachu, right? And how Rav Kook saw life, and historically what happened to Rav Kook, how just everything, there's this big meta lineup of all the levels of seeing this parallel process and refractical thing happening over and over and over again within Rav Kook's life. So I'm just going to read.
You have to be so confident to be flattered by a favorite.
You have to be so confident. Here, parts of it he was flattered by. I'll read this to you because it's going to mirror what we're going to say today. Okay?
He wasn't offended.
He wasn't offended. He was. I mean, it's remarkable. Okay. I'm not going to read. It's not so lengthy. We're not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to pick out a selection or two. Okay. And this is signed by the big guns. What? He's doing good. Hey, Michael. Michael, just to catch you up for a second. Welcome, first of all. And what we're talking here is we're gonna read parts of Rav Kook's Cherem letter because there's some parallel process that lines up with what he's saying and how he understood life. And as I just mentioned, I heard Rav Betzalel Noor say once that in a podcast that it could be he was somewhat flattered by the Cherem letter. Okay, by some of the things they wrote about him, right? So it's amazing. Okay, so I'm not gonna read the whole thing. It's signed by Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, the son of Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, the big guns, the big players. I mean, there's a lot of history between him and Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. They used to travel with each other in the early days. There's a lot of history here. Again, we just want to read as it relates to our piece. Okay, it's talking about how Rav Kook is filled with kefira, deadly poison. Okay, but this latest one, called by its creator Orot, is too much. Deathly poison is in it. There are contained therein many things which are forbidden to hear, all the more so to write and print. Unfortunately, they are read by the youth who do not know, nor do they desire to know, to distinguish between light and darkness, especially as the author is a rabbi. These words enter into them as poison. And on the wake of such words, the destruction of Judaism is foreseeable in the spirit of education of the younger generation. It's almost laughable reading this at this point, We see who was on the right side of history and who maybe was, okay. If we were silent until now for fear of controversy, strife, and desecration of the name, meaning Hashem's name, which could result thereby, they have already washed away the bounds of silence. Should we remain silent, we will be guilty of sin, God forbid. Attached is this booklet of which several chapters sing the praises of the wicked. Now they're saying things about him. He has converted darkness into light and light into darkness, and proclaimed the wicked righteous. Even those young men and women who engage in athletes and frivolity, known to us to be Sabbath desecrators and immoral, he claims to be serving holy service. What he writes in chapter 34, he says, the B'nai Nuram, the people that work out, make higher yichudim than people sit and say Tehillim all day. If you ever want to be controversial, you just have to say, if you ever want to get a letter written about you, just say that, and they'll write it about you, okay? Right? Right. In his writings, he gives the sinners that which their soul crave. On the other hand, he stings the pious of Israel as deeds of Amalek, and maintains that the soul of the sinners of Israel is more correct than that of the perfect believers of Israel. So I'm just gonna stop over there. Again, it goes on for longer. Meaning to say, he gives the sinners what they're looking for, he speaks to their soul, and he puts the righteous in their place. Right? He turns darkness into light, but he also turns light into darkness. Meaning to say, Rav Kook was the one, and this is why he was somewhat flattered by this letter, because he was the one to transform everything to Echad, to Hashem. As we just said, a person who sees the inner side of kefira could suck out the honey, right? And it's dafka the tzaddik, the person who's as great as Rav Kook, who is able to find the good in the lowest of the lowest of the lowest of the lowest. He's able to say how the Rishayim have the highest souls. It means they're right what they're writing. Everything they said is true, right? He's able to find the goodness in the darkest of souls, right? And he's able to call out the righteous camp to talk about the flaws within the community and to say how this is not proper. right? And as we've been learning in this piece, right, he's going to say, and what he's been alluding to, but he's going to say it more straight out, the reason why the Zionists came to embody kefira is because the religious people, the old Yishuv, didn't have a proper understanding of God. So in order to make them right due to their habituative Judaism or their conceptual Judaism, the Zionists had to come and wipe that away and say, we completely deny that in order for something new to grow, right? So Rav Kook, once again, doesn't fit neatly in one place or the other, right? So he was, as I heard, he was somewhat flattered by this letter. In another place, and I'm going to say this also, I heard this from Rav Betzalel Noor, who's the authoritative translator. He translated, many works from Rav Kook. A lot of wins today, right? On the other hand, there was a right. There was, again, there's some history here how the Gera Rebbe came to meet Rav Kook, and he wrote a letter that was mildly against him, but later he maybe resyndicated it, but they were still friends with each other. They had a relationship because there was all this, in response to the Cherem letter, the Gera Rebbe came, the Imrei Emes, he was the son of the Sfas Emes, he's buried right outside Machane Yehuda. If you want to go there on a class trip, right across the street from Machane Yehuda. The Imrei Emes is buried there. And so the Imrei Emes, the Sfas Emes' son, he came to meet Rav Kook after the letter, and they had words with each other. It's not recorded exactly what they say. And then he wrote a letter, and then he didn't resyndicated it, but he was friends with Rav Kook anyways, even though he wrote some letter, whatever. You could read about it in the introduction over here. There's much ink spilt on this topic. Not much, but some ink spilt on this topic, okay? But either way, in the letter that the Ger Rebbe wrote, he said, he compared him to Rav Meir. And Rav Meir, we know that there was a Tana named Elisha ben Avuya, okay? And Elisha ben Avuya was from the Arba, the four that went into Pardes, that were Nichnasu Pardes. And it says Elisha ben Avuya, right? It was Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Rabbi Akiva, and Elisha ben Avuya, right? So it says, one, they Al Tamru Mayim, right? When you get to the heavens, when you get to this deepest place, don't say there's duality, say there's only one, right? Al Tamru Mayim, don't say there's double, right? So it says Rabbi Akiva went in, he was Nichnas v'Shalom and Yatzev v'Shalom, and it says that one looked and went crazy, the other also when he became paralyzed, I think it was. And Elisha ben Avuya, the great Tana Elisha ben Avuya, it says afterwards he saw the angel Metatron, the Memtet, was standing and sitting, and he says, isn't there no sitting by the Kisei HaKavod? Must mean there's two, right? Must mean there's Hashem and there's the Memtet, the Matat. This malach, because you're not supposed to be standing, and these are deep Gemaras. But the point being, it says Elisha ben Avuya came out, and the first thing he was Heitzis Benatios. He was cutting saplings on Shabbos. You're not allowed to do Tlisha on Shabbos. You can't detach something from its source, right? And it says that Elisha ben Avuya was cutting saplings on Shabbos. He was doing the Issa D'Oraisa of Talisha, of detaching something from its source. And someone saw him and said, aren't you the great Tana, Elisha ben Avuya? And he went, and he cut something from its source. He says, oh, you must be Acher. You must be someone else. Because the great Tana would never do this, right? And this is obviously Meramis to cutting things from its source, is not seeing the oneness behind the creation, again, on these very high levels, obviously, right? That he thought there was two things. Life disconnected from a source, that there is an angel Matat in Shemayim that is not fully connected to God, Chas v'Shalom, because he's sitting. It's not supposed to be sitting by the Kisei HaKavod. So he's disconnecting thing from its source to be Merames to this type of deep kefira of that not everything is connected to Hashem, right? And then Rav Meir, who was the Talmud of the main student of Acher, of Elisha ben Avuya, so they said, how can you learn? He said, I heard this from my Rebbe, Elisha ben Avuya, Acher, right? He said, how can you learn from Acher? Don't you know? He's the famous Russia, right? The quintessential guy who went off the derech, right? Is Acher, right? So he said, how can he goes? No. He goes, I'm able to eat the seeds and throw away the shell, right? So in the letter from the Ger Rebbe, right, that he wrote that he was like Rav Meir. Once again, Rav Kook, I heard Rav Kook must have been flattered from that. Because exactly what Rav Kook was doing. Was he a maskil? Was he a tzaddik? People couldn't make heads or tails out of him, right? So he was going deep, 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 b'toch kefira, in order to pull out, to find the good, even in the sinners. That when you go deep into the kefira, right? He was Rav Meir. He was the one that's teaching us as well. Not only did he do this in his life, but he was the one who's teaching us as well to do this in our own lives, to transform our trauma into healing, to transform our pain, to transform our difficulty into light. Orot me'ofel, lights that come from darkness, right? Right, it's the v'nahapachu, right? That's the adelo yada, right? Now I want to say one more remark on this as we continue. And it's just amazing. This gets better and better, I want to read for a moment over here what Rabbi Nachman says. Rabbi Nachman in lesson, it's the first chelik in Likutei Moharan, lesson Samach Dalid, 64. It's called Bo El Paro. Well, just to preempt over here, what Rabbi Nachman says over here is that there's different types of kefira. There's different types of heresy. One type of heresy is something that you could know what to answer. It says Dam al Hashiv. You can know, someone says something, you have an idea, you answer it up, right? A person has difficulty in their life, and they're able to say, oh, I think I might know why that happened, or I think I can understand this, we can wrap our minds around it. But there's a deeper type of pain, there's a deeper type of suffering, there's a deeper type of kefira, which is, it comes from what Rabbi Nachman says, the chalal panoi, that when Hashem, in order to create the world, he had to alleviate that space, those choppers, you hear that? Sounds like fighter jets above us, okay? It says, Zecher timcha amalek mitachas hashamayim. Mitachas hashamayim should continue to drop all the bombs upon our enemies as we reach this Purim holiday, right? So Rabbi Nachman says that that there's another type of kefira, that when Hashem had to create the world, if everything is all Ein Sof, everything's the light of God, there's no room for the world, so Hashem had to vacate a space, that's called the Chalal Panoi, and mitzamtzem his or, constrict his light. This is the major topic of the Arizal and Kabbalah. This is the starting point of many, many things. We're not going to go deep into it right now. You could spend your life, whatever. It's not our topic. It's just, so what Rabbi Nachman says is that in that place, there's a reality of darkness that there is no answer to. There's a reality of darkness that there is no answer to. And therefore, no one knows how to answer this. And you have to stay away. You have to try to stay away from this darkness. But he says this. And this is letter Gimel in Samach Daled, lesson Samach Daled, Oz Gimel. Achda, I didn't photocopy this, but it says, Achda, im yesh tzaddik gadol, you should know, if there's a big tzaddik, shehu b'chinas Moshe, who's like Moshe Rabbeinu, hu tzarech dafke la'ayin b'divrei apikorsis elu. You dafke need to go into the matters of kefira, like Rav Kook was always reading maskilic things, right? You have to go into the kefira. The afshi ef sharli yashvam kenal, even though you can't really answer it. Al kain zeh al kol zeh al yidei iyuno shema'ayin shu malu misham kamen neshamo shenaflu v'nishko b'tuch apikorsis azos. But even though you're not able to answer up the kefira, the tzaddik needs to go into the kefira. He needs to learn it, and from that he's able to lift up how many fallen souls that have become entrapped and engulfed within inside that aspect of darkness, within inside that aspect of kefira. Ki elu hamavuchos v'akusha shalapikorsus hazos ba mechalal panoi, because this types of perplexity comes from the chalal panoi. Rabbi Nachman goes on to say this is why Jews are called ivrim, because we're able to go over, in English to go over, right? But we're called ivrim because we're able to traverse even the deepest, darkest of kefira, the deepest, darkest of depths. The Jews have the ability to go into the kefira and suck out the honey, right? And certainly the tzaddik does this, and this is exactly what Rav Kook is doing, okay? Rav Kook is going into the kefiras and learning the kefiras and teaching us about the kefiras, because by doing so, he's bringing out how many fallen neshamas have returned to Yiddishkeit and infused the whole Zionist thing with dati, with Jewishness and religiousness and Yahadus, all because of the words of Rav Kook delving into the deepest of depths, to the deepest of darkness, right? It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay. With these introductory words, now we're gonna delve further into it. Okay. So it says, I read that line of Misha Makir Asatoch, right? That person who recognized the inside. So we're just going to go to the last paragraph on the page. It says, Kishem Mamtsiim es Omek Dina Shal Mrida Kefira. Yeah? You see that? It's the last paragraph on the page. Kishem Mamtsiim. Do you have a sheet? I don't know if there's enough. Maybe there's enough. Okay? Kishem Mamtsiim es Omek Dina Shal Mrida Kefira. When you're able to look inside the depths of judgment, of rebellion and kefira, that this kefira tells you to run away for some fanciful vision and a newfound understanding. Run away from the inheritance of our ancestors in order for some fascist vision, chazon lev, some new illusion of socialism or new idea of Zionism or any one of these things. But in truth, this is the thoughts of tshuva that breaks waves. It's make es hagalim. Motziin es hatzad hatov shaba. We take out the good side, the good aspect that's found within it. Shuhu hagrain haklali shel tshuva mikol shiflos and mikol kilkol. And that goodness which is found within the kefira, within the newfangled understanding, that becomes the root of tshuva, haklali shel tshuva mikol shiflos mikol kilkula. That returns everything from its low state and returns everything from damage, from being damaged. Umitoch ba'im gam lishov ma'kalkala hagadola sheyesh b'harisa mitzad asmo. And from this understanding of finding the goodness from the depths of judgment, it returns the big destruction and harisa, like a hores, like a storm, mitzad atzma. It returns it back. Ve'az shavim el Hashem be'emes, and then the kofrim, the people that deny Hashem, ve'az shavim el Hashem be'emes u'geula bala olam, right? Then geula, redemption, comes from the world, right? So the person who's able to go into the darkness and find the good that's happening within the darkness, that returns the storm and returns the destruction and returns it to its shorish, that it returns all the kofrim and everything returns in its ola back to its root and returns to its source, right?
Who's he talking about? Like the regular people or tzaddikim, or who's this person that's supposed to go into this?
So what he goes on to say is, first of all, this is every member of the Am that's able to find the good in things, right? That is able to be machzir, everything, the shorish, he's talking about. But he's also talking about, again, the ability, like I read from Rabbi Nachman, he's talking about the ability of the tzaddik in order to, so he's talking on both levels. Because he doesn't specifically say, later we're not going to get to today, he alludes to Moshe Rabbeinu, but he also says that this is by way of divine process. Meaning to say, by way of divine process, Hashem is always going to put people in the generation that are going to be able to be machzir the din l'shorsha, right? Hamtakas adidim l'shorsha. That Hashem is going to be able to, in every generation, Hashem is going to put people that are able to return everything to its source, right? So on a national level, Am Yisrael, we're the nation that does that, right? But on an individual level, it's the tzaddikim that do that for the Am, right? It's like it says in the Kuzari, we're the heart of the world, right? So we're the heart and the mind of the world. The Kuzari says that, Rav Kook says that in another place, right? So we do that. Am Yisrael is like that to the world, right? As we see nowadays, our moral stance and the light that we're bringing to the world. And on the other hand, simultaneously, it's also the tzaddikim that are able to find the goodness. And that's why I started with this whole thing about Rav Kook being compared to Rav Meir, right? This parallel process that's going on. And what Rabbi Nachman says, how the tzaddik as big as Moshe Rabbeinu, which was Rav Kook, who's able to find the goodness in the Omek Adina, right? Okay? And Be'emes, it's all Rabbi Nachman, about finding the Kudas Tovos.
But I feel like Rabbi Nachman would say, don't go into the kefira. That's why I'm confused.
Well, Rabbi
Not talking about the tzaddik, I'm talking about the regular people.
Right. So, but I think, okay, so we're asking a good question over here. I'm going to take a stab at it.
He does say that.
Rabbi Nachman says that regular people should stay away from kefira. It's only the tzaddik that's able to. But I think by attaching yourself to the tzaddik, that allows you to handle the kefira that's in the world, right? So the tzaddik, it's not just some ethereal thing. I mean, it's that too. It is a spiritual thing of hiskashrus to tzaddik. But hiskashrus to tzaddikim also means that the tzaddik shows you what you have and your ability to do things on your own. So it's not just, okay, that's it, but the tzaddik teaches you, right? And Rabbi Nachman, by connecting to Rabbi Nachman, he allows you to handle the kefira in your life, right? They say a famous story over here. Okay, I'm not going to go into this Indian of what the tzaddik does. I'm going to put a pause on that because that will totally derail the shiur, right? But again, it's by us connecting to Rav Kook, right? We're learning how to handle difficult things in our lives, right? So it's our hiskashrus to the tzaddik that is teaching us how to try to find, how to handle darkness. If that makes sense.
Send the story of the tzaddik to the group after.
I'll send the story of the tzaddik to the group after. Okay, there is a. Okay, it's a little bit further, right? And this goes back to Rebbe Meir, right? That Rebbe Meir was finding the goodness from Acher, right? They say about tikkun ha'olam sheyatze mimkoresh ha'Yisrael, the tikkun of the world that comes about through the source, through the power of Israel, hu ideal shel tshuva. That is the ideal of tshuva. Now I was going to read from Orah to Tshuva here, but I didn't bring it in. That Rav Kook says the whole world is always moving towards tshuva, right? That the process of the world is, you see, it's the second to last line. Tikkun ha'olam. Right, that the whole world is evolving towards tshuva. Anytime that a person fixes the path of his life according to a midah kavua, a steady way, lo yuchal, a habitual way, he means this in a negative sense, lo yuchal etzeis midei hachisrona shebeseicha. A person can't go out of the, next page, a person can't go out of the limitations of their minds. B'midot umaise, in their trait and in their actions. Ve'echazeh yishalom apyo. So how can a person ultimately complete himself? Right? Lechein, right, means as long as a person's habituated in a certain thing, you can't go beyond your habituation, or your perceptions. Right? It's like I saw Ram Chaim Vital once asked, he said, you're supposed to work on yourself from your midos, but how do you solve your midos from within your midos? It's a problem, right? So he's saying a person who's static in their thinking, right? You see someone, this is what I do, this is how it is, this is what Yiddishkeit is, don't talk to me about any of this stuff, right? A person who's static in their thinking, how do you actually go beyond yourself, right? Therefore, right, a person, it's chalila, you should not become too habituated in the main aspects of your life. Haklalim v'apratim in general and specific. La'olam tzarich adam hayachid. Forever a person needs, right? You need spontaneity. You need flexibility of mind. You need the ability to think and rethink. You need the ability to let go, to drop your thinking and start again. Like I heard from Rav Gerzi, what's one of the main things we learned from Gemara? How to think and rethink again. And when we think we got it, we realize, oh, that's not what it's saying. Rethink, right? The individual and the group. A person always needs to go to be rethinking in order to fix their brokenness, their spiritual brokenness, and their practical actions. And therefore, all the newness, the things that happen to us in life, and all the questions that we have, why did this happen and why did that happen, and how we deal with this situation, and how do we deal with the other situation, that is the process of life being your teacher in order to bring you about good. Hinam ach orcho shel tshuva. These are just paths of tshuva, of returning to yourself and learning more about yourself. V'tamid tzricha tshuva lios omedet barosh hapiska. And returning to yourself always needs to be the main thing, the pinnacle of that which we need to achieve. Shel sulam ha'ashlama anoshis. The piska, the pinnacle of the ladder of life in which man needs to come to complete themselves with. It's like we know this, I've been thinking about this like all the time. I think about this as like my personal philosophy of life is like, life is our teacher. Life is coming to evolve us. Everything that goes wrong in our lives is coming to teach us about ourselves. Not so much about the outside world, but everything is to learn inwards and to look deeper within ourselves. You know, I would like to at least stand by that principle. Sometimes I do fall into blame, but I would like to stand by that principle, right? That life is coming to teach us, right? It's like therapy. There's a process of life that goes on, and we need to learn about ourselves, right? And it's the kefira which brings about a new idea. But if you're static in your thinking, right? So you just get knocked down by everything, and you can't move on. So it's like there's a story I once heard from a Rebbe of mine, Rav Cherem, from Shayashav, and Rav Cherem said an amazing story. I think he said it was about Rebbe Elimelech of Lezhinsk, that there was a person who was going off the derech in Lezhinsk, a chassid, and the friends went to Reb Melech and they said, Reb Melech, you got to speak to Chesky. Chesky is having all sorts of problems in life. You know, he has questions, he has kefiras, and the Rebbe didn't go and speak to him. You know, a few months later they come back to Rebbe, you got to speak to Chesky. Chesky changed out. He cut his long payas. Now they're short payas. A few months later, the Rebbe doesn't say anything. The friends come back. You got to speak to Chesky. Chesky flipped out his nice, stylish plastic glasses for slick new glasses. You know, a few months later, you got to speak to Chesky. Chesky changed out his long jacket for a short jacket. A few months later, time goes on. You got to speak to Chesky. He's leaving it all. You know, and some time goes by, and Chesky is now living with a non-Jew in Brooklyn, and whatever it is, and all of a sudden the Chesky gets a knock on the door from the Rebbe Ramelech, and he's like, oh my God, put away the treif, put away this. Women get to the back of the room, and the Rebbe says to Chesky, he says, what happened? What happened? He goes, Rebbe, I never meant to come this far. He says, what happened? He goes, I had questions. It started with tzveikus and emunah. It started with doubt. And that question led to more questions, and that led to more questions, and that led to more questions. And here I am, here I find myself today. No one was able to answer all the questions. So the Rebbe Melech said back, he goes, no, your problem is you stopped asking questions. Your questions brought you to here. But if you continue asking questions, it would have brought you full circle, right? And it's the questions of kefira, the difficulties, the challenges that we have, that when we keep on asking those questions and we let go of what it is that we're thinking, and when our mind is just static, this is who I am, this is how it's going to be, it's never going to change, right? So what happens is we get knocked down by life. But when we keep on asking questions, that brings us full circle, right? That's the tzaddik who's able to pull out the goodness from the kefira. It's amazing. It's amazing. Should we continue, or I don't want to go? Are we okay on time? Let's see the time.
It's 8:58.
Okay, so we're gonna
2 minutes. Yeah.
2 minutes. So okay, I'm not gonna start a new paragraph. But what I will say is that, again, just to connect this to a transforming trauma in our lives, to transform the difficulties that, as Rabbi Nachman says, right, Yeshin Yan Shakol Ma'apech Letova, right? You have Esther, you have Haman, you have Achashverosh, right? And the kefira of saying we're going to kill all the Jews, and the denial of God from Haman and Achashverosh is the very thing that brought back a new understanding of God. That's what it says, right? Kiblu Masheklo Kiblu Kfar. That there was a new Kabbalah Satorah that happened on Purim. Right, that we didn't accept on Har Sinai, we re-accepted, or we newly accepted again from the hardship that happened on Purim. And was only because kefira, difficulties, traumatic experience happened to the Jews that they said, we're going to wipe all the Jews off the face of the earth, much like nowadays, which led to a deeper emunah, which led to a deeper understanding, which led to a rethinking and re-education of Hashem, right? And that's v'nahapachu, that's the adelo yada bein aror Haman v'Baruch Mordechai, right? Because at the end of the day, all these things, it's just the yad of Hashem guiding the world to be Magala the Hester, as Rav Kook is being Magala the Hester, revealing the goodness from the darkness, right? As Rav Kook says in another place, this is Hashem's Zroa Netuya. What does Hashem's Zroa Netuya mean? It's the long arm of history guiding us towards Geula. Right, the Zroa Netuya of Hashem, of the kefira that happens and all the difficulties that happens, it's the long hand of history, it's the long hand in our lives from birth till the very end, right, that is guiding us, that is continually transforming light, darkness into light, and light into darkness, and darkness into light again, right? And that is the emunah that we've just, since we started learning Zerona in this section, that is the emunah that the tzaddik is teaching us, right? From beginning to end, the Rat leads to light. The Purim, the Haman, the Kukameni, the Mayor Giuliani, Al Golani, all these things leads to a deeper Am, leads to the deeper nation, and that's why Rav Kook took it as a compliment. That's why Rav Kook took it as a compliment. So this Purim, that is bizoiche pinahapachu, to wear the costumes, as Rav Nosson says, bimakbet on all milei de shtuta, all matters of simcha, to draw the highest oros down betoch ha-kelim, to mamish have an or and kli, and have big kelim to receive the biggest or. Amen. Amen.